Congratulations, Inojin Yamanaka, you somehow managed to become the only shinobi capable of accidentally helping two geniuses fight each other without ever realizing you were even the one setting up the battlefield. That's honestly kind of impressive. Somewhere Shikamaru, after figuring out what happened, he's probably developing a stress headache that's so powerful it deserves its own change in chakra nature. And after looking at everything that happened, it's fair to ask one uncomfortable question. Was Inojin simply too naive, and does he share some of the blame of Kashin Koji being captured? Join me in today's newest Naruto Explained video where your OBC, your original Boruto chief, takes a look at why Inojin does deserve some of the blame for what happened with Kashin Koji. How much blame? I'll let you decide that by the end of the video. Also, over on my Anime Explained channel, we got a brand new Chainsaw Man video essay that I'm super proud of. It goes over Yoru, the War Devil, one of my favorite characters in the series, my favorite character in part 2 of the story. Video will be linked in the description box and in credits for those who are curious as to if Chainsaw Man is really just a gooner manga like Twitter tells you, or whether it has substance or not, and as well as for those who are curious about the series, or you're just a hardcore fan of the series like I am. When Kashin Koji was captured by Kawaki, the immediate reaction from most fans was to blame one of two people, and honestly, it made sense that the ire was directed in the way that it was. One group of people blamed Kawaki for attacking someone who just helped save the world, hiding in the shadows of Orochimaru's abandoned hideout and trying to create a better tomorrow, basically being the Shadow Hokage to Shikamaru long before Boruto ever returned to Konoha. Think of Kashin Koji as being the shadow of the Shadow Hokage. Or the other group of people directly blamed Amado for manipulating everyone, exactly like the master chess player that he was. He set the whole thing in motion. Amado walked away with all the spoils of the moment, pulling off a plan that would make even his biggest hater, Shikamaru, say that plan was so good. Why didn't I think of it? And if I did think of it, why didn't I get a royalty check from Amado? Another group, they blamed Kashin Koji. Buried beneath all of those conversations that the fandom was having was also another character that nobody really wants to talk about. A certain blonde-haired boy with a messed up haircut and a huge crush on Naruto's daughter, and a rejected application of the Donut Club. Inojin Yamanaka. Now, before anyone starts sharpening their pitchforks in the comment section, let me make something crystal clear here. I am not saying Inojin is the primary reason Kashin Koji got captured. I know I can be petty when I want to meme a character, but Inojin does share some blame here. If the plot twist was a pizza box, which for the three people that are about to bitch that I'm using another comparison, here's a picture of a cookie. Look at the cookie. Hope you feel better. If the plot twist was a pizza box, then Kashin Koji was walking away carrying the whole pizza box, and Inojin was left with a couple of slices of the pizza and picking off the pineapples because pizza with pineapples is only eaten by a demon or a clone of Jiraiya. So why the pizza box comparison? It's to paint the picture that the majority of the blame falls squarely on Kashin Koji, in my opinion. I do think it's a bit disingenuous to drag Kashin Koji for having 10 directions and failing to see Amado's trap. I get it, the jokes are there. The guy that could see the future didn't see this coming. Yes, he possesses arguably the greatest information gathering ability in the series, but I don't think it's fully fair to hold that against him. Do actions have consequences? Yes. Is the timeline fragile? Yes. One unexpected change can alter things in a massive way. Koji has stressed that Boruto to multiple times. The point, it's a broken record. The same with the lectures about knowing the future. At the same time, Koji, while he has all this power, he hasn't fully grasped the fact that over-relying on 10 directions is just as bad as Boruto pressing Control-Alt-Delete on their plans every time Boruto ends up disagreeing with the decision. It's a pretty clever callback to the warnings of part 1 that told us repeatedly, indirectly, about relying too much on ninja tech. You shouldn't do it because it dulls your skills as a shinobi. 10 directions is technically Otsutsuki Shinjutsu, but science was used to transplant it and it still carries the same lesson. Koji is a clone of one of the greatest shinobi, but this also shows that genetics alone don't make you a great ninja. Koji ended up making multiple decisions that directly led to this current predicament, and so did Inojin. That is on them. But here's the thing, just because Kashin Koji deserves a bulk of the blame doesn't mean that he's the only one. Not all shares of blame are equal. When you go back through these chapters in hindsight, Inojin unknowingly made several mistakes that piece by piece made Amado's job dramatically easier. It's something we pointed out as the chapters were rolling out in the last arc, particularly with how Amado was shown pausing upon hearing Koji explain how his power worked. Again, let me be clear, I am not saying Inojin has all the blame, but I am saying he does have some. His actions weren't malicious or intentional stupidity. They came from something that highlights a problem with the new generation that shows the difference between them and the older generation of Naruto and Konohamaru. Trust being given out too easily and being unable to see through deception. That, in my opinion, is why this discussion is worth having. That's not to say that Inojin is a bad shinobi, far from it. He's extremely skilled. Is his jutsu bag super deep? No, but when you look at what he's actually doing, the kid is more skilled than you're giving him credit. However, one problem he has is that he's a good person who grew up in a time of relative peace. That natural caution and skepticism that comes from growing up in an era of open Cold War, it wasn't there. The problem with being a good person is that it makes it easier for you to be manipulated. It's not a sexy reality to bring up, especially when discussing a shonen, because so many shonen try to teach us to believe in the capacity of good that we as human beings have. But the truth is that there are people who see the good in you and look for the opportunity to take advantage of it. Selfish intentions, they usually win out over morals more than you want to admit. This situation with Inojin, Koji, and Amado is proof of that. Arguably, the biggest mistake that went under the radar when these chapters first got released is the communication channel. When Kashin Koji explained the mechanics behind 10 directions and how he sees elements of the future, Inojin was serving as the link connecting everyone together. His jutsu, which to his defense he learned in a short period of time, allows him to keep channels of communication private if he wants to. When the battle was going on and Koji was speaking, he could have closed the channel, he just didn't. That means every word being spoken had to pass through him. At first glance, nothing seems wrong, especially if you're reading the chapters relatively quickly, which a lot of people do. Inojin linked everyone together, and it was crucial for the plan to take down Mamushi, especially as things got more chaotic. Except there was one massive problem. The channel never got closed, and when you look at the chapters of the battle, so chapter 28 onward, you'll notice something you pay close attention to: the speech bubbles. When Inojin was linking someone with the jutsu to communicate, you had that exaggerated speech bubble for the person that was projected speaking to the broader group as a whole. And you had the edges to show the communication that was going on with it. When people weren't talking via the jutsu, it was a normal speech bubble. Boruto being told where to teleport by Kashin Koji, the speech bubbles are normal. When Kawaki and the rest of the team were speaking amongst themselves, it was the same thing. Inojin, as the jutsu caster, he had speech bubbles for obvious reasons. But when Shikamaru was linked and giving the directions to everyone, all the dialogue spoken by him had those exaggerated speech bubbles. Inojin didn't have Kashin Koji connected when Shikamaru was speaking. Koji also made it a point to tell Inojin to drop the mind transmission formation jutsu, even when he said all the others wouldn't be able to communicate. Koji didn't care. When Inojin saw Koji was trying to have Kobu killed, he quickly cut back on the mind transmission formation jutsu, and you can tell he linked everyone in that moment as well. Boruto was already suspicious, but he knew exactly where to appear, and it's because the channel was completely open. He heard Inojin say, "Hokage rooftop, Kobu's in trouble." It's a explainable thing to do, given how quickly Inojin had to move. The communication channel stayed open to everyone so Shikamaru could give out orders. Yet when the battle was taking place at the home of Ada, you could argue the communication channel didn't need to stay completely open the whole time. Inojin, again due to circumstances, wouldn't think to briefly close the channels. That's where the mistake happened. Koji explained that 4 days ago, when he taught him the jutsu, he hadn't had any updates, and as Koji was speaking, Amado heard everything about 10 directions, and you can tell from Amado's reaction and his internal monologue that he hadn't even considered such a possibility. Even if you are keeping the channel open for Shikamaru to give orders, Situational awareness matters too. Koji had been going out of his way to stay hidden. Inojin knew that. He also had just shut down the channel when Koji needed to speak in depth, and Koji already warned him prior in the arc that people learning that he could see the future, it should not happen due to the changes that it would cause, especially when people try to alter fate, which is why Kashin Koji said as a singulated fate, they have to be careful. Once Inojin realized that he needed to go to the battlefield, he shut off the transmission, but when Inojin was asking a 10 Directions related question, he also should have had that same sense of mind to know to cut the transmission off. He just had a brain fart. He knew, oh, we're talking about something that future me did. Cut off the transmission. He also should have known, hey, he's talking about being able to see the future. Cut the transmission. Again, it's a brain fart. And it's due to the panic of the situation. Sarda's eye went splat and Mamushi was multiplying. Nobody can blame him for making that mistake. That sudden pause by Amado, that lack of the over-the-top villain grin that a lesser mangaka would have used. He just paused because everything clicked in his head in that moment. That pause wasn't there for decoration. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Ikimoto rarely wastes panel space. Characters don't suddenly stop moving unless there's a reason. Amado stopping right when Koji reveals his greatest ability, how it actually functions, tells the audience something incredibly important. Amado just learned the rules. Not everything, but enough. Think about this from Amado's perspective. What is his goal? Revive his daughter. Being able to see aspects of the future will cut down on all those variables. No more second guessing. No more driving into the future blind. Now he wouldn't just guess when he would arrive at the destination. He'd know exactly when and how and everything relevant to what happens afterwards. It's a roll of the dice. Amado knew Koji couldn't control when he got the updates. He literally heard it. The fact that it was 4 days since his last one was enough for someone like Amado to make the educated guess that it could be potentially weeks before he got another update. He also knew that it could take place 2 seconds after Kashin Koji told Inojin he didn't get an update, which is why he stressed to Kawaki, hey fam, I'm going to give you your power back, all the power you want, but I need you to do this for me immediately. It's of the utmost urgency. Because Amado understood waiting meant a potential system reboot on 10 Directions, and Amado's window would be closed. Even if he didn't formulate the entire plan in that exact moment, that conversation likely became the foundation that everything else was built upon, and that's extremely impressive when you think about it. Amado basically solved the puzzle without having half the puzzle pieces. He's truly a genius. Again, Inojin wasn't doing this with malicious intent, especially given the circumstances. However, it does show a naive streak though. 3 years ago prior in the timeline, Amado placed a fake bomb around Shikadai's neck after deceiving Team 10. Amado has been deceiving ninjas ever since he came to Konoha. In the 3 years since then, Amado has been under lock and key. Inojin knows that. Even pointed out Amado being out in the open wasn't a common thing, and yet he still trusted him. Someone the Hokage himself doesn't even trust. Someone Inojin's own father doesn't trust. He knows that, and yet he still slipped up. The difference is Sai and Shikamaru come from different eras. Their instincts are to be suspicious. Inojin, on the other hand, he's more hardwired towards trust, unless someone does something super foul. Ikimoto choosing to have that be exploited is pretty clever. The moment Inojin said how odd it was that Amado was out in the open, and yet the alarm bells never went off the way that they should, and if they did, Inojin wasn't listening, that was pretty smart. Now, to be fair, there could have been reasonable explanations that went through Inojin's mind, especially if you put yourself in the shoes of Inojin. Maybe Shikamaru approved it. Maybe Sakura requested something. Amado did say he had data on the battle that could be valuable. Yet, I'd say, look at how Amado framed everything. The devil's in the details. Could you give the scroll to him? When Inojin asked, hey, do you mean by Boruto when you say him? Notice how Amado's eyes went from not being shown to suddenly you see his eyes when he clarifies Kashin Koji. And he asks, you've met him before, haven't you? He asked a question. He didn't give a statement. He asked a question. Let's pause for a moment. Remember dramatic irony. If you followed the channel long enough, you've heard me refer to it multiple times. We know something characters in universe don't. Inojin's location was never disclosed. All they knew was he wasn't on the battlefield. Inojin also doesn't have to be next to someone to connect them with this jutsu. Amado didn't know for certain that Inojin was with Koji or that he had a way to reach him directly. Inojin should have known that, but being the trusting fellow that he is, he gives him the info that he needs. He says Koji's in a weird place, and he says give the scroll to Boruto, that will be faster. He presses Inojin to take the scroll right away when Inojin says let's give it to Boruto, despite Boruto being able to instantly teleport, because Amado knows Boruto would have sensed Kawaki. Inojin fell for the trap. Again, Kashin Koji should have known better too. They each share blame. One made a mistake due to the era that he was brought up in, and the other made a mistake by not trusting his own judgment due to his senses being dulled from over-relying on 10 directions. A real shinobi doesn't have to see the future to be prepared, especially a shinobi of Jiraiya's caliber. However, Kashin Koji's not Jiraiya. He's a clone. He's no more Jiraiya than Mitsuki is Orochimaru or Delta is Akibi. Genetics don't make you the person that you come from. I personally think this moment was one of the biggest series of mistakes ever made in Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. It also cemented Amado as one of the most dangerous characters in the series without him ever having thrown a punch. He has consistently made educated guesses and gambles, and he's been baiting at a level where you have to ask, was this rigged? He's either got some super secret power that we don't know about, or people suddenly become incompetent around Amado, as my Giants were last season when they blew a 30-point fourth quarter lead against the Denver Broncos. Everything just happened to go right in both scenarios depending on who you were rooting for. It becomes even more impressive when you realize Amado has been suspicious of Boruto from as far back as chapter 15 of 2 Blue Vortex. He knew Koji was helping Boruto, but he was more alarmed with how Boruto and Koji knew that he was limiting Kawaki's power. Being able to listen in on that conversation told Amado everything he needed to know. For a scientist, they don't need to know every detail. They just need to know enough to figure out whatever technology they're looking for. It's no different than figuring out the voice of a writer. Can the voice of a writer change over time? Yes. Can you disguise your voice intentionally? Yes. But there are small things that someone familiar with your writing does pick up on. Using two examples, it's like how people like me who grew up on the Harry Potter books, soon as J.K. Rowling published under another pen name and changed up her writing style, we still figured out it was her because all the small things bleed through. Like if you're familiar with the way I write, I use a lot of comparisons, similes, metaphors. I use a very structured pacing. I use punchlines, dirty jokes, things of that nature. Maybe a little bit too much repetition, but that's neither here nor there. But things like that bleed through over time. With one of my favorite book series, the American Assassin books, I can tell from how the sentences are structured which books were written by Vince Flynn and which ones were done by Kyle Mills and Don Bentley. Even though the two of them try to a lesser degree to mimic how the late Vincent Flynn wrote those stories. Small things give it away if you know the voice, but to the untrained eye, you'd think it was all the same person writing if you didn't look at the cover. Side note, read the books. Fans of the American Assassin fans love Dylan O'Brien, but fans of that series know, hey, that book we treat it like Dragon Ball fans treat Dragon Ball Evolution. Amado had every reason to be curious, if we're being honest here. But Boruto said it in chapter 14. Koji being identified as Boruto's helper was something that couldn't happen. Boruto didn't say that randomly. Koji would have told him that off screen, just as he likely would have told Inojin off screen to make sure that his involvement stayed hidden. When he spoke when the channel was open, it was likely under orders to only connect Koji when someone like Boruto was the one being spoken to, because Inojin's power allows him to make sub-channels. The best way I can describe this, I know another comparison, shoot me. The best way I can describe this is to think of it like a Discord server. You have general chat, but you also can go into a voice server and limit who has access to it. Inojin basically forgot to close the channel, and Amado took advantage. It's like someone handing you the lock, and then 5 minutes later they give you the key. At that point, you're the one in control. Amado had an unconscious Kashin Koji for how long, we don't know, but it's not crazy to think that Amado isn't doing tweaks to Kashin Koji before he wakes up. Again, I have to keep stressing this, even though I know it's going to annoy those of you guys who hate the repetition, but this isn't Inojin being unintelligent. It's just showing that he's a product of his era. He's gotten caught slipping just like others in his generation. Perfect example, Ao almost caught Boruto slipping and would have killed him if Konoha didn't shove him out the way when the laser was getting fired off and Boruto was off guard. Nothing we saw from Boruto's durability by that point in the story suggests that it was high enough that he could have survived an off-guard hit like that. Konoha knew it, which is why he saved it. That's the difference between a generation raised expecting deception versus a generation that was raised in a time of peace and is too openly trusting and lowers their guard too fast. Again, look at how Sarada treats her Sharingan compared to Sasuke and Itachi. They cut that Sharingan on and they kept it on until the chakra ran out or the threat was eliminated. Sarada throughout part 1 and at times in part 2, she cut the Sharingan off too early. She made assumptions that the fight was over, and she also would cut it off when the threat wasn't going directly at her. This generation is going through growing pains. That difference is huge. Questioning everything versus being too quick to accept what is in front of you. And that's why Amado is so dangerous. He isn't a shinobi, but he's as deceptive as one. He's in a different league than Inojin. He's a manipulator. Manipulators don't prey on stupid people. Manipulators prey on decent people like Inojin, and they prey on people who have good intentions, like Kawaki when Amado needed him to reawaken his karma seal. He was putting seeds in Kawaki's mind. He needed the karma before Ishiki was even defeated. Inojin didn't betray Koji, he just didn't realize he was being interviewed by Amado. Manipulators prey on people who naturally answer questions because it's the honest thing to do. Inojin wasn't trying to betray anyone. He simply didn't realize that Amado was in possession of an ulterior motive. The scroll was another red flag. This is probably where I think Inojin deserves the most criticism. Not because of what happened, but because of what almost happened before Koji ever got captured. Remember Inojin's very first idea? Give the scroll to Boruto. Immediately. No hesitation, no debate, and honestly, that was probably the correct decision. Boruto possesses Flying Raijin. He can teleport instantly, and Inojin saw it. He would have stuck to his instincts, and that's where Kashin Koji should have as well. But that sweet snake Amado knew just which buttons to push. Give it to Kashin Koji right away. He knew that Koji be tempted. He said he would know exactly what to do with it. Yet, Koji himself said that he wasn't going to open it immediately. So why not have Boruto take possession of the scroll? Because Koji was relying on 10 directions. What if I get an update in the time I'm waiting for Boruto? What if the information is that important? Maybe I should give the scroll a quick look-see. Amado played them both. A non-shinobi tricked two people into not listening to their instincts. The odds immediately improve in Kashin Koji's favor if he tells Inojin to just give the scroll to Boruto, because it literally forces Kawaki to hop off the scroll because Boruto would sense him otherwise. God forbid Boruto cuts on the Byakugan. Kawaki would be seen as well as sensed. Imagine Boruto grabs a fly swatter and says, "Hello, Kawaki." Responsibility is such an ironic word to use here, but I'm going to use it. Koji stressed being responsible to Boruto and Inojin, yet think about what happened. He failed the responsibility test, and to a lesser degree so did Inojin. Responsibility isn't only about changing the outcome, it's about making the correct decision. If someone ignores good advice, the blame still belongs to the person ignoring it, but the advice still needs to be given. Inojin never really challenged Kashin Koji and said, maybe we should wait. He accepted Koji's confidence at face value. He acted very much like the child that he is. deferring to the very adults that you as a child believe have all the answers. But there are times where the innocent views of a child might be enough to make an adult see a different perspective. Koji literally just admitted that his information wasn't current. That's the entire irony. The warning signs weren't hidden. They just had just been explained. It's just that Koji and Inojin both ignored them. There's another layer here too that I do think deserves more attention. Inojin spent most of Boruto to Blue Vortex growing as a shinobi. He almost died. He gained new abilities that pushed his clan's technique to a different level. He helped save the village. His confidence, it has grown tremendously. But emotionally, he's still the same compassionate kid that we watched grow up since the beginning of Boruto, especially if you take into account the anime continuity. His greatest strength is also his greatest weakness, compassion, which if you want to get super meta with it, him being an artist makes even more sense when you take that personality trait into account and the fact that his mother's big on flowers. Flowers typically have love languages to them, just like how art also evokes emotion. Inojin still wants to believe people are honest, and he has a big enough heart to give people a chance. Normally, that's admirable. Against Amado, that's probably the worst personality trait to have, because Amado doesn't treat people in a way where they can be beaten by raw power. He beats them by letting them make perfectly reasonable decisions. Every answer Inojin gave made sense. Every action felt logical. Every choice seemed harmless until in hindsight, it turned everything into evidence that Inojin was being played. Hindsight is the most brutal teacher that anybody has. So should Inojin be blamed for Kashin Koji being captured? Yes, but only to a point. Koji deserves the overwhelming majority of the responsibility, in my opinion. I'd honestly put it around 85 to 90%, and then the rest just goes to Inojin. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. In the meantime, click here to check out this Naruto Explained video, or click here on the right to check out the Chainsaw Man video that I was talking about earlier.